And
Yes,
Shawn, welcome to SuperAthlete Radio. Really excited to have you on. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We were just talking about beforehand whether or not who brings more energy to the table. As a two-decade NBA sports performance coach, you were uh, our podcast guest from a couple months ago, Steve Hess, and both you guys are bringing it.
No, Steve Hess has me by a mile. He's amazing. He's
Uh,
amazing. I wish I had his energy.
yeah, God bless. Before we get into what you're doing now, all the work that you did in the NBA, could you tell us a little bit, kind of your origin story, where you grew up, and how you got into this space?
Yeah, I grew up in Maine, so lived there the first, I guess, 23 years of my life. I went to a bunch of different colleges. I'll spare all of their names, but I went to one, transferred after a semester. I went to, I wanted to be a business major. So I wanted to own a business, but didn't really, I was 17 when I entered college. Like most 17, 18-year-olds, you have no idea what you want to do. And I just said, I want to be, in business. But anyways, it was not a good fit. Left there, transferred to a more local school that I could commute to, and I think my GPA was a point 0.8, and they asked me not to come back. I was really lost. I had no idea really what I wanted to do. I had not even the first clue. Took a couple of years off from school, as forced, obviously, um, and just kind of bouncing around. Coached JV basketball. I worked in a pool store. And it just kind of, at one point, it hit me like I'm going nowhere fast, and I don't want to do that. And my high school basketball coach was coaching at a small college up in the northern part of the state of Maine, and a few of my high school teammates were up there, and he was like dragging all these kids that weren't great fits at other schools and didn't know what they want to do up to his little school to play basketball for him again. And I met with the athletic trainer, and I said, no offense, I have no idea what an athletic trainer does. Now, granted, so when I'm changing schools, I think this was 1993. And I said, I know you guys hand out water, tape ankles. I'm just ignorant to what you do. So he starts going into everything: care, prevention, assessment, treatments, on and on and on. And then he starts talking about adjunct fields. And he says strength conditioning. And like, I didn't even, again, this is 1993. There's obviously no internet, and I live in Maine. I don't know strength coaches. I know personal trainers. Um, but I'm like, I don't really know what that is or means, but if you can do that through this athletic training degree, that's what I'm going to do. I entered into athletic training without ever wanting to be an athletic trainer. I did it simply because, back then as a strength coach, you could have been a history teacher. Anything with a 4-year degree, and passing that exam makes you a certified strength coach. So again, I just kind of I clung to that athletic training as a route for me to become a strength coach. And then I worked in a outpatient physical therapy clinic at a high school. So I was providing their athletic training services and a few hours a week, or however many hours a week, in the PT clinic. Then I had an opportunity in minor league baseball, independent league in upstate New York. I was the athletic trainer, and I was so eager to be a strength coach that, and I didn't know anything about independent league. I said, can I also be your strength coach? And the GM on the other end of the phone, he's like, yeah, whatever, kid, do whatever you want. As long as you're the athletic trainer and these injuries are taken care of. And so that was the first time I was actually able to add strength conditioning to my title. From there, I was only there for one season. Baseball is not a fun sport to work professionally. My opinion, it's a great sport,
Like
but
that.
um, play every day. You have, for that independent
Mm.
league, I think we had Mondays off, but you were making up a rain out or something. So just literally every single day at the ballpark. Um, and it was, again, being independent league and any minor league, you're on buses for a long time, and it just wasn't a fun process. I love the guys, I love the training, all of those factors were incredible, but just the game volume. From there, I landed a graduate assistantship as a strength coach at University of Connecticut. um, my third year there, I was
Mm.
hired on as a full-time employee and was able to uh, train the men's basketball team, which I don't know if you follow Connecticut men's basketball at all, but they're a pretty good program. And so that was kind of I don't know if made it sort of coming out party type of thing, but to work with UConn men's basketball was definitely a huge accomplishment for me just starting out in the profession. I always wanted to work with football actually, and you get in where you fit in, and this basketball opportunity came about, and I've never looked back. I've harbored some dreams of going to work in football, but the volume of people versus basketball, the amount of players that you have, I feel like you can impact more change. From Connecticut, I went to Rutgers University. I was there for 4 years. I trained the men's and women's basketball team, a couple other sports as well. And then in 2005, I came to the Indiana Pacers as the head strength and conditioning coach, and spent 18 seasons.
And then when you were at UConn, of course, they had that legendary coach, Jim Calhoun. In terms of leadership, is there anything that you took away for him that you saw that he did very well?
Yeah, Coach Calhoun is amazing. He has a very gruff exterior. I know a lot of times in press conferences, he's a little bit hard to understand with his New England accent, how quickly he speaks. He can be very hard on his players, but it was all with a method behind it. And, looking at his track record of how his teams did in the NCAA tournament, sometimes there were seasons that weren't great in the regular season, and he was very detail oriented. He was hard on the players. They didn't know which end was up, but all of it, as I learned and while I'm watching this play out, was he was obviously teaching and mentoring young men who really were young. They were kids that were out on their own and great basketball players, but didn't really know about how to work or about life. And there were so many little subtle messages in there that guys ended up, after they would graduate or after they kind of understood what was going on, they absolutely loved that guy. I'm sure there were some that didn't, but more often than not, players really understood and took something away out of the program. And then also watching him prepare the team on a daily basis, like their best basketball was always late in the season. Big East Conference Tournament, March Madness, those teams were always prepared to play really well because of the way he controlled practice throughout the season and how he was managing the day-to-day. But he was.
It sounds like.
But behind closed doors, truly fantastic guy. He said to me one time, "Don't tell anybody that I'm a really nice guy," and he's fantastic, and I owe him a lot.
That's awesome. So in terms of takeaways on that, very high attention to detail, and it sounds like he had a plan and he was relentless in terms of pushing to get that plan across.
Yep, and maximizing, making those kids understand that there was another level to be had. And if you want to be great at something, that there are a lot of sacrifices that need to be made. There's goal setting that goes with that. There's expectations. It's not a linear path to being great, that it's going to be a squiggly line. And sometimes you don't end up being great, but if you learn that there's a process behind it and that you have to actually work hard and get outside of your comfort zone, then there's a lot to be learned there.
I love that. That's so good. And then you sound like you're a young guy, did not have that much experience when you got hired on by the NBA's Indiana Pacers. What do you think they saw in you, and how did you prepare for that role?
What they liked about my background was that I was dual certified as a strength coach and an athletic trainer. And because of the frequency of games in the NBA, because most players do have something that they're battling, and when I say battling, like patella tendonitis, a chronically sprained ankle, there's always some sort of injury component, maintenance component that I was able to wear that strength conditioning hat and the athletic training hat. So I could work with players from a rehabilitation standpoint because I knew early phases of rehabilitation, and I also had the understanding of what the finished product should look like when they're returning to play and getting on the court.
And then what do you feel like is the number one goal of the strength coach for an NBA team?
number one goal is player availability. You want all of your guys available for all 82 games, which is, damn near impossible. But that is the goal. And it depends on where the player is on the health and wellness kind of spectrum. Sometimes it's somebody who is that has an injury history that, for sure, the number one goal is to make sure that they are resilient and try to get them through as many games as you possibly can. And then you have some young players that maybe first or second year, they don't play a lot of minutes, but they have physical things that they need to work on. So a player that's not in the rotation at all, and is 20 pounds undersized for his position, body composition and strength are probably at the forefront of what his training looks like. So constantly assessing, do they need more performance or more health and wellness? And guys are just at different places on that line. Some players have incredible bodies, and I've had a couple of players in the past where I've said, honestly, I don't even care if I see you in the weight room. I can't help you physically. I'm here to support you with whatever you need. If I need to grab you with something, I'll do it. But there's obviously just some specimens that come through those locker rooms. Now, basketball with limb length and their sizes, most of them need to get stronger and continue to strength develop. But there have been some, there are players that are doing some amazing things, and I might just screw you up if we spend too much time together.
I think that's a great. You say player availability is the number one thing, and I think that's something that can transfer outside of pro sports as well. For all those listening to this, is just I think it was LeBron James' quote of structure and consistency create perfection, but this idea of showing up every day and focusing on process and putting in the work and showing up and doing what you need to do. And that's one of the things I believe why health and energy are so important, because no matter what you do professionally, that's the number one thing, right? Can you show up for work at your best?
And with young players,
go ahead.
And different ages, but this is what I really tried to instill upon young players, is creating a routine where if you have that routine in place every day, it's not that you are doing extra or you're doing, some sort of work that you're not accustomed to. If you just can wrap your mind around, here are the 3, 4, 5 checkpoints of things that I have to do every single day to perform at the highest level, it doesn't become extra. It's just what you do. I think some of the greats, I think like Kobe was a great example of that. Of, it doesn't matter what time I land. This is my routine. This is what time I wake up. I'm going to be in the weight room. Then I'm going to get shots. Then I'm going to watch film, whatever your order is. But knowing that just happens every single day. And if that doesn't happen, you've seen a lot of players that don't last long in the NBA because skill level is so high, and sometimes skill can be the reason that a player doesn't last. But a lot of times they don't have a routine. Every day is like they want to try to make it up every day when they show up. Like, hey, are you going to come into the weight room today? You're on the schedule. Well, I'm kind of tired. I'm not feeling it, or I had a fight with my girlfriend, or whatever the case may be. I'm like, that's not a long-term success model.
And that takes brain energy every day, right? To decide, am I going to go to the weight room? What am I going to do next? And that's right. That can be.
Yep. Yeah, we like players with routine because it like you said, the brain energy.
And then in your time with the Pacers, what did you find that maybe was most surprising? And what is something that let's start there. What did you find most surprising in terms of working with that population?
A couple of ways to answer that question that tie in together. So my first season in 2005, staffs weren't as big. There wasn't as big of an emphasis. I mean, not to say there wasn't an emphasis on lifting weights and health and treatment and taking care of your body, but basketball is such a skill-dominated sport that I would have players say, what is coming into the weight room or eating this or sleeping early, going to bed early, what does that have to do with me putting the ball in the hole? I've actually heard a couple of players say that to me. And I'm like, that's really hard to say. How How long you want to keep putting the ball in the hole, now that's what we're talking about. You're a gifted athlete. You can get away with having chicken tenders before the game and not sleep and go out or do whatever it is and burn the candle at both ends. And you're going to be okay for a while. But again, like if you don't develop that routine early on, when you then try to flip a switch and say, I'm going to be all about eating healthy and being in the weight room and doing this and all of these other areas, without a routine that's kind of been instilled, it's very hard for those players to flip the switch. It's not often that, a player that hates coming in the weight room and then has had some injuries and then 5 years later says, I'm going to work really hard and train the hardest I ever have ever trained all summer long, all off season, and continue it into the in season. Then you watch them work and they're working hard for themselves, but there's been no foundation for learning what work actually looks like. So tying that in initially, when players weren't completely invested in every facet of performance, that it was mainly about what can I do on the court. Now, there's been an evolution to this. The NBA looks different now. So college strength programs are doing an even better job. Players are coming in. They don't necessarily love the weight room, but they understand the value. They don't love to eat healthy, and they're not all of them going to eat healthy all the time, but they're hearing the message earlier. You can't help but see it on the news, social media, other athletes talking about it. It may take a little bit for the player to embrace it, but it's not a totally new concept, where back in 2005, lifting weights to some guys was kind of a new concept, or sleeping 9 hours, or having supplements. Now, basketball is unique, so you have to understand the culture. It's a little bit different with guaranteed contracts. Again, the skill-based sport. Do football strength coaches, performance people have the same complaints? Probably some, but I'd say vastly different when you have a lot of NFL rosters that are essentially playing week to week, and being a collision sport. I think that they're dotting more I's and crossing more T's. So I can really only speak to the basketball side of things. And then individual sport athletes are a totally different animal. Individual sport athletes, they want to wear everything, be monitored with everything. They want to know every piece of information. It's that type A, OCD type of, and I don't mean to bucket every individual sport athlete, but you're out there by yourself competing. It's a different level of accountability.
Evan, how do you feel? What's your take on nutrition? How important do you feel like that is? And then what have you found that kind of works that you do?
To me, it's the number one thing a young player can do is to invest in somebody to prepare meals. Now, it's fine if your wife or girlfriend prepares meals or you're hiring a meal service, but let's get that dialed in immediately. Recovery between nutrition and sleep, those two things are going to dictate how well you're going to recover and how much you're going to be able to do the next day. And if you are not eating well, you can't possibly think at the highest level. You can't make great decisions at end of games, crucial moments. And this isn't to say that I've seen plenty of guys eat chicken tenders, chicken wings, pizza, do all of that stuff and be fantastic performers. But is there another level? Is it about longevity? Is it another piece to having a routine and taking full ownership of your career? But I think nutrition is arguably the biggest thing in sport performance.
And I'm a huge believer that I communicate daily to our group here, our tribe, that our physiology drives our psychology. So it really psychs me up. We haven't had a guest on who's made that connection. Could you talk a little bit about why you think nutrition and recovery potentially are going to impact what you saw in terms of like end of game decision making and reaction time and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I can say even from a coaching standpoint. So if we played last night on the road, you fly to the next city, you get in your bed at 3:30, you were drinking coffee because you're watching film, digesting what happened in the last game, watching film for the game that's now going to happen tonight. You don't sleep well, you have a crappy breakfast, you're putting the wrong nutrients into you. I would be concerned with how frantic your coach's huddle is before you come in and give a plan to your team. Are you thinking with 100% clarity? Now, I know we're talking about nutrition, but sleep shows that this is part of the case, and I'm relating sleep and nutrition together here, because I think that if you fail to have good nutrition, solid nutrition, I'm not saying perfect nutrition, but if you're missing meals and lethargy and dehydration, and it has to affect your thought process. And when you are in a timeout and you're trying to decide who's going to get that shot, now in some cases it's easy. You have your player that is supposed to get that shot, but how do you want him to get the shot? Like, what play are you going to call? What are they going to run for a defense? Like, this stuff is happening very quickly. And without being sharp with your nutrition and sleep, that slight delay can cause some confusion in a huddle, or maybe drawing up the wrong play. Now, a lot of times we'll blame a coach on something like that, but we also have to look at the players. The play may have been drawn up. The right play may have been drawn up, but how do the players sleep? How do the players eat? Are they with you? Are their thoughts in the moment? Are they present? And maybe they just one of them doesn't go out there and execute the play properly. And so I do think that nutrition can help you tolerate the big term in the NBA is load, or minutes played, but without having good nutrition or solid nutrition, that you're not going to be able to tolerate the loads or the minutes consistently over an 82-game season.
Yes, and for all those listening, which is a consistent theme for our audience, a lot of entrepreneurs, things like that, they're always looking for ways to increase load. So just making the connection between what you do with what you eat, how you respond, how you sleep, having routines that don't take brain energy, they can all direct and increase your load towards what you want to really do in terms of your craft.
I also like to call it
competitiveness.
Pardon?
Go ahead.
I also like to call it just reps, so we talk about loads, but if you aren't fueled properly and you come in for a weight training session or a court session or all of that stuff combined, when does your energy give out? Is your energy going to be the rate limiting factor in how much you can produce? Because if you can give me high quality reps in the weight room and high quality reps on the court, your exposure to high quality is much better. But if you haven't slept well and if your nutrition is poor, you are going to give me less quality reps. However, you may keep the duration the same, but now you're feeding garbage information in, whether it's weight room or shots or whatever. You're feeding garbage information into the body, into the nervous system, and you're going to lay down patterns that are garbage. So again, the nutrition, if you come in with poor nutrition, it limits how many good reps we're going to be able to get from you.
That's amazing. Yeah, going back into the power of showing up and how you do everything matters.
Yeah.
But before you went into that, what I was going to say is I feel like competitiveness is a kind of under talked about trait in professional sports and a lot of times overall in business. Could you talk about do you feel like it's important what you saw in the NBA? And then is that something that you feel can be developed?
It's a fantastic question. I'm going to first start with, can it be developed? Because I'm stumbling on that one right now. I think it's difficult. I think at certain ages, the older we get, the more kind of set in our ways. And again, that doesn't mean everybody, but I think there's something at some point of the development cycle that competitive really, it's either there or it isn't. I think the motivation level is always what I find interesting. Is an athlete intrinsically motivated or are they extrinsically motivated? And ideally, you want them all to be intrinsically motivated. It's certainly not the case. And as a coach, you have to tap into what are those extrinsic factors? Is there something that I can do to almost gamify this or make it more relatable to them? Ideally, the athlete should know if they're externally motivated, but they're not consciously thinking like that. I would when I worked in colleges, I used to love playing at the last training day of the week. We would play ultimate frisbee with my different teams. We would play like a little wall ball, handball thing, and what I really liked about those things, outside of it breaks the training monotony, and I could always figure out who the competitors were. And the people that were fiery on the court and really liked to compete on the court or baseball or whatever sport they were in, were the same kids that were really trying to win at ultimate frisbee. And then some of those fringe kids that would just kind of hang on the side, and how to get them involved. So tying back into can you teach it or coach it or pull it out of them? I wasn't able to find a great way. And we would, I mentioned two of the games. We did double Dutch. Like, you're trying to find a lot of different games, because maybe the kid just doesn't like ultimate frisbee. I hate being outdoors. I don't want to do this. But generally, it was always the same kids that just weren't competitive. I don't care. I don't want to look uncool or try too hard, whatever their rationale was. But I think it's really hard to develop the older somebody gets.
And then what you saw in the NBA, how much, when guys are playing on the court, how much of a factor does that play in who wins and who loses?
It's certainly a factor. Skill is the number one factor for the most part in the NBA, night in, night out. But you have to, every team and at every level from youth sports on up talks about having a dog in the locker room or a couple of dogs in the locker room, like those people who just do not want to lose. And a lot of times those players can really elevate players who may be they want to kind of blend into the wall. Somebody's enthusiasm to dive on the floor elevates players who maybe they're not going to dive on the floor, but they will improve or increase their intensity or their effort. Some nights you do see teams that are just hungrier, that are maybe a little less skilled, but they do win because they just have more will. Sometimes super talented teams don't win games that you think because they just don't have somebody who's going to hold the rest of the team accountable. That so-called dog of looking the star in the eyes or a role player in the eyes and say, pull your head out of your butt and let's go. We got a job to do.
And then continuing on this idea of mindset, I'm huge on this idea of whether it's sports or outside of sports, we're dealing with stuff all the time in life. That's going to happen. We're never going to get to a place where we're not going to deal with whatever it is, BS, pain, uncertainty, anything like that. So it's how quickly we can recover. In the NBA, I'm guessing that's super important because you're playing so much. Did you see anything specifically that the coaching staff did in terms of helping players get on to the next game and focus on what's ahead rather than what just happened?
Yeah, because the games happen so frequently, a lot of times if it's a really bad performance, every coach has a little bit different style. Some coaches will come in after a really bad loss and say, we're going to flush this game away. We're not even going to watch film. We're not going to think about it. This was just a bad night. Now, if you're turning in a lot of those types of efforts, we're going to watch this game. Was it effort related? Was it skill or technique related? So there are different triggers to coaches of when they want to pull out pull a certain tool out of the toolbox. A veteran team that literally you may just say, all right, that was an outlier. We didn't bring it tonight. We're playing tomorrow or in 2 days. Let's focus on that one. I think it depends on the age of the team and what coaching points can be brought up from the game previous. In terms of the mindset of, it's just so interesting how coaches do structure the thought process behind the upcoming calendar. I should say some coaches view things at 3 games at a time, and so instead of thinking about how many games there are in totality, it's like we're just focusing on the next 3 games. Forget about what just happened in the past. There are some takeaways, some learning things from there, but we're going to focus on these next 3 because you look at that schedule and it's just such a daunting thing to see on paper that you forget that when you're there playing the game that one night, it's important, but it also gets lost in the fact that there are 82 games. So Tuesday night playing against a bad team with nobody in the crowd can be hard to get players up and motivated if they're extrinsically motivated. Some really rely on that crowd noise and the vibe, and so coaches really struggle to figure out that balance with certain players or teams.
Going into tools, you're transitioning out of working in the NBA now, or this year you're not working in the NBA. But in your work in the NBA, were you a believer and user of like heart rate variability? Now with blood tests being so common, are those things that you believe in that you would apply to private clients now? How do you kind of view those tools?
Every professional league has a collective bargaining agreement. The players and the unions have to, and the league all agree to certain things. Now, there are some things that we could not force our players to do. You cannot force the NBA players to do blood draws. You cannot force them to wear anything, any sort of wearable. So your sales job becomes extremely important of what's really important. And for me, heart rate variability, it's very interesting. I certainly am a believer in it, but I found it hard to really embrace as a team sport person, because if the habit with a lot of players will be, it says I'm not going to perform. My score is really low, and they're looking at one data point that's an outlier. They had a poor night of sleep. And there's so many players with superstitions. So that player says he's either going to have a self-fulfilling prophecy and he's going to go out and play poorly, or he's going to go out there and have the night of his life, and then he's going to come back and tell me, get the F out of here. I don't want you to monitor me with anything. I don't want it. It didn't tell me anything. I had a great game. Even though you can educate them all you want about we're looking at trends, one data point does not mean a good day or a bad day. It might be mildly significant in that day, but we're not going to react to that. But players, young adults, they're not focused on listening to the part about the trend. They want to know what is happening to me right now. So we never pushed it. Now, if a player were going to wear an Oura ring or do something on their own, like, we would encourage it. And we would also tell them, because again, this is like, it's their data. And if they're choosing to do it on their own, they don't have to share it, but we would make ourselves available as a resource to talk about it. Not a lot of players do. The insights that we would gain from that, we did have a couple of players that would talk to us about their Oura ring and their sleep and their scores. But what I find from a lot of the testing, like whether it's force plate testing or the HRV, it's really not hard to find fatigue in the NBA with playing, with the travel schedule, with the game schedule. I know if I'm tired and I don't play a single minute, I can only imagine how our starter feels. It's playing 33 minutes a night. I guarantee he's tired. So if we can look at the schedule and understand where areas of potential illness may be, understanding, like, getting out ahead and being proactive, sweat testing, everybody loves to do sweat testing. And again, it's something that I believe in, and I like to know the content. But if I just simply weighed you in and weighed you out for 3 or 4 days with some double sessions and regular practices, weight loss, if you're a heavy sweater. Now, I'm not customizing a drink based off from that, but I can then preemptively understand that, okay, as soon as he walks into the building just to begin his day, I'm going to make sure that he has a water bottle when he walks in the weight room, or we're going to start pre-hydrating, because I feel like so much of, speaking specifically about hydration, of seeing somebody that's lost 4 pounds through the course of an hour and a half practice. Now we're reactionary. Let's try to get out ahead of it. And so the same thing for me with HRV, sleep. I see that we have we're playing 4 games over the next 7 days. We're doing it 2 weeks in a row, and four of those total 8 games are on the road, and 2 of them are in different time zones. It's not hard to figure out that HRV is going to suffer there, is going to get low. They're going to be fatigued. There are these factors that I'm not going to wait to react to them. Let's get out ahead of them by identifying these areas.
Yeah, a couple of things on that. We just had Marco Altini, who out in Italy, he's really kind of the world's kind of global forefront leader on HRV. And that was something he talked about, what you just said about just because your score is low, that doesn't mean anything. It's about looking at trends. It's like looking at the long piece. And then also something that we continuously push here at SuperAthlete is like these 2 parallel lines going up with like the bottom one. We want to continuously work on our movement practice, our breath practice, our mindset practice, our sleep practice, our nutrition practice. So we look, feel, and perform. Just that keeps going up. But at the same time, this top line is how well can we perform when we feel like shit, or, when life happens, or we feel fatigue, or things like that. So I agree with you 100%. The thing I really like about HRV beyond athletic performance is that it's really, I feel like it's an indicator of how, it is an indicator of how we're responding to life's stressors. I'd love to hear, with you being in the high performance space 25 years, what are some techniques or tools that you have found valuable in terms of helping guys conquer stress and dealing with challenges and problems and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a constantly evolving piece for me, and I think for every practitioner, and there's more science that comes out all the time. And some of the science that's coming out all the time isn't necessarily about new techniques, but I have to admit that I'm pretty late to the game in terms of breathing and mindfulness of breathing, and it's it's probably a couple years since I've really become a big believer. It's not like yesterday I became a believer. It's it's been an evolution over time, but in the past it wasn't as big of a concept. But so the research to support some of this stuff is now helping us truly understand the value of what type of breath and breathing and mindfulness. And I think deliberate breathing, having a breathing routine at different intervals during the day is very important to mitigate stress for players. I think understanding that when they're feeling aroused, now there's also types of players that, for our pregame workouts, you have some players that are really high strung and they go out and they play that way. That's why they're in the NBA. They're high energy players. They're running all over the place. And so in a pregame workout, I kind of want to feed into that. I want to, as long as their game is, they're matching their game. If it's a frantic player who is a 3-point shooter, but doesn't play frantic, but is in their head about, I've missed a few shots, I'm really high stress, I'm high strung. Now it's slow down and breathe. Instead of getting their nervous system ramped up for competition, we want to pull their nervous system back a little bit, because that ramped up nervous system and doing a lot of jumps and power training pregame for a guy who needs to be kind of more chill, now he's jumping a half an inch higher, an inch higher on his shot. And so now the ball's hitting the back of the rim, going a little bit longer. But conversely, you have a guy that comes in with really low energy and plays low energy. Okay, let's keep him in that state, because that's how he is as a player. So trying to match what the personality of the player is, and I'm always looking at what their game style is. Now, that always isn't optimal health. We're talking about optimal performance. But when it comes then time to relax, recover after a game, now let's pull that breathing back. Let's do some mindfulness, some meditation. Again, like meditation I'm a believer in it, but I've become more of a believer as time goes on. I think, the naps during the day from a recovery standpoint, because of the lack of sleep in the NBA, that even just laying there, there's good research to show that even laying there for 20 to 30 minutes with your eyes closed and trying to clear your mind is hugely impactful. And so we don't have to look at a lot of complex strategies to help recovery. Um, there's some very simple things you can do. You just have to be deliberate about it.
Yeah, I love that. When we started this radio show, it was, all right, let's dive deep into training and recovery and hydration and meets and high performance. And a lot of what I've discovered is that to add into that equation is personality type and psychology. And I think what you just said, I think, is super valuable for all of us to kind of understand how we operate at our best, which sounds like a lot of your players, they understood this is what got me here. I am high strung, so I don't need to do a visualization, relaxation, breath practice before the game, because that's gonna slow me down. Or guys who are slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Guys who are chill, I don't want to ramp up before the game because that's going to have my shot go long. I think that's, I agree with that.
It has to, and the recovery,
also,
the recovery mentality has to match kind of what your personality is as well. Like if you don't like water, I can't tell you to go take a cold plunge, because the benefit that I think that I'm getting, and I'm driving your heart rate higher, and you're just anxious being in there and you hate it, then it's not best practice for you. Let's find something else that is actually going to help you recover.
Well, I don't know if I go that far, because if you follow social media, taking a cold plunge is the number one key to success and life happiness and getting rich. So
I see that every day.
When I was doing research here, I saw that Indiana, over your time there, they had overall was a very successful franchise. What are, in terms of the teams that did well compared to teams that did not do as well, what were some of the leadership and practices that you saw that was like, okay, this team's gonna be successful. This team's gonna do really well.
Yeah, I think at every level of the organization. So we can have this conversation about staff members, front office, players, coaches, on and on and on. But obviously you hope to identify, hire the right talent, people that are skilled, and then you hope that I think, and with that, it doesn't always happen overnight, but there has to be continuity. I think one of our, we had a really good stretch of not missing a lot of games due to injury, and I thought that was a lot to do with our medical staff's continuity and the way we spoke to each other and our communication style. And we didn't let a lot slip through the cracks because we were constantly talking about players. And then when you're on good teams, players are more motivated to play through nagging injuries, and they see the common goal, and it starts to come together. Unfortunately, a lot of times people don't really see the benefit in something until they see the benefit in it for them. And when you're winning, that the benefit then becomes either a better contract or more playing time, or whatever it is that's motivating that particular individual, but then they buy into the process. And so from an injury standpoint, sometimes it was just, we always like to think we do an amazing job, but sometimes you have to have some willing participants that actually want to go out there and play through a jammed finger or a slightly sprained ankle. And so the continuity with skilled people and that communication piece.
Thank you for that. And then just going off, bouncing off what you just said, there's a lot of trainers and coaches, sports performance coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, who take pride in terms of they're measuring their success in terms of how many soft tissue injuries that they've had with their teams and their background. Do you believe that there's a correlation between what staffs are doing and reducing soft tissue injuries? And then if that is true, could you talk a little bit about what are some kind of common practices to minimize and eliminate those.
I do think that I don't think you can only hang your hat on games not missed or missed due to soft tissue. Sometimes you can identify that a player is more likely to get hurt, and there may be some modifiable risk factors. The density of the sketch, maybe the player didn't do a whole lot during the off season, and now you're trying to play catch up once they show up to your facility. Maybe this has been a recurring injury on a new player that he's 5 years in the NBA and has had recurring hamstring problems, and the problem is somewhat deeply rooted now. Like, so there's going to be some outcomes that aren't always favorable for you because it's just your roster changes. Sometimes, like I said, the motivation level may change. Some players feel like they want to be 100% before they go out. They're upset with their playing time, so they may want to sit out for something. There's a lot of factors into the soft tissue injury thing, so it makes it really muddy to just simply judge yourself based off from that. Now, there are plenty of things that you can identify that are predictable patterns, and I think the teams that do a really good job of that are the ones that do have an understanding of what truly is modifiable, what the patterns are, and have great communication between the medical staff and the strength conditioning staff, and that the philosophy matches. So sometimes you'll see a great medical staff, but the strength staff is a little more archaic and just kind of lift that and put it down and, meatheadish. I call them strength goons. And then sometimes you have great strength staffs with a little more archaic, medical staff. And you truly have to, both sides have to speak the same language, and both have to have conversations where you just throw everything out there on the table about a particular player and say, here's what I think, and don't be afraid to voice what it is. And I've had a lot of great conversations with colleagues where we don't know exactly what we're trying to convey. I don't speak fluent physical therapy, but I speak it well enough, and they don't speak fluent strength conditioning. But if we keep the conversation going, we can figure out how to either accomplish the goal or identify the issue. But yeah, I think soft tissue is something that you can certainly impact. But there are so many, sleep, nutrition, hydration, training history, all of those things are also going to play a role that you often have limited control over.
And then staying in this idea of recovery here, you mentioned that personality, you looked at personality type as how potentially as a way in terms of, let me rephrase it. You, one of the ways you communicated to players in terms of what would be the right recovery modality was based on their personality type. Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, I think it was just simply, I wasn't trying to go too deep there, but it was more along the lines of like the cold plunge or a contrast bath or do a pool workout. And some people just aren't comfortable in water, or, go get in a cryo chamber and it's the worst thing that they'd rather do anything else but that. I think that there are certain types that you're trying to, what you're trying to get for a nervous system response and what type of fatigue they have. I love float because it seems to work with all types of fatigue, but again, you have to have somebody that's comfortable in the water. So that's just a kind of a quick example of fitting the personality type. I bring up water because it's kind of a common one.
I think that's great. And because there are so many different types of recovery modalities, or to expand beyond that, there's so many different ways to train and move now that are out there that, find what works for you. Everyone can find something that works for them.
Right.
So I think that's really good.
And I think we get so caught up in that as practitioners of this is what science says works best. And that, as we get older, you and I get older, we just figure out kind of what fits in our day, what we would be willing to do, what fits our lifestyle, and so we have to be mindful as practitioners to just find something that fits. It may not be perfect, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but find something that's a low-hanging fruit that the athlete will comply with and do, and start there. So it's the person that asks me, the question that I get all the time at a dinner party or something. What should I do to lose weight or, get stronger? The lose weight is always the question. And what cardio is the best cardio? I said, the best cardio is the one you're actually going to do. If you hate biking, I'm not going to tell you to bike, but if you like getting on elliptical is it. That's where it's at. Don't force a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And we just live in a special time now. There's so many different things we can do, and there's so many different opportunities that it just find what works for you.
Right.
But you have to do the cold plunge. You have to. That's the rule. You were with the Pacers for a long time, so obviously you were staying on top of what was going on in terms of new training strategies, the way players were adjusting in terms of body types and coming into the league. How did you stay on top and at the forefront of everything in your space?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to stay in the literature. You have to read research. And not just research, because all practitioners know research is generally probably a year behind of what people are finding to work really effectively. And not all research is great research, but usually it starts there of making sure that I'm trying to read the latest research. You're talking to other practitioners, you're weighing it with, maybe they're doing something that's a little bit unique or something that's totally different, and you just want to gain an understanding of it. And then you go back and then you start reading about it and see if there's elements that you can implement, or maybe you just think, I can't, that guy's crazy. What the hell was he just talking about? So then you go back and you vet, but talking to other colleagues about what they really kind of hang their hat on or what they think is interesting. It pains me to say social media, because there's a lot of bad information out there. But if you follow people, like in my example, I follow people that I really trust and respect, and they're often narrowing down what's important that I think I might want to read. So if they're posting something, if it's a tendon specialist out of Australia that's posting certain articles on tendons, I don't have to go to my Google Scholar or to my journals. I can click on the article that she just linked. So social media does a great job of vetting some of that for me. Doesn't mean that, like I said, there's a lot of bad information out there.
If you could share, what are two or three of the people that you follow on social media that you really find trustworthy?
Oof. Boy, that's hard. I was just specifically referencing Jill Cook. She's great with tendons. One of her cohorts, Ebony Rio, this Keith Barr. So we deal in the NBA. You deal with so many tendon-related issues that it's always a major topic of staying on top of the latest tendon research. It's hard for me to think just off the top of my head, because there are so many good That's resources.
Awesome. I said you gave three names there. That's awesome.
Okay.
And then in terms of, is there any common myths that you feel like are out there in terms of athletic performance, high performance, sports performance that you think should be debunked?
That it's complex. I think that the more staffs grow and the more people want to carve their own little space and show how smart they are and provide research, I think that many practitioners are overcomplicating the process, and that there are so many people talk about these marginal gains all the time. I haven't heard it used as frequently in the last few years, but it still is a topic where people talk about marginal, if we can gain 1% here, 2% here. Well, I have found that usually it's a 30% rock that somebody's not even addressing. So I don't need to measure HRV, for example, or get really in depth with a certain training program if if I know that they're not sleeping at night, or they don't like coming in the weight room and they give you a half-assed effort, I think it's getting really good at a few basic things and trying to hit the bullseye on your 2 to 3 lowest hanging fruit opportunities. I think that trying to go after 7 things at one time, we know from goal setting that if you set out a goal on 7 different things, and I want to make this athlete do this, and this, I'm probably not going to even come close to hitting the bullseye on any of them. But if I only set the mark for 1, 2, maybe 3, but I would say 1 or 2 things, and keeping those the most important things, then probably a lot of other periphery things are going to improve at the same time. So I think people overcomplicate it. It's to me the biggest myth that everything needs to be measured. A sleep questionnaire, and when a player doesn't really want to share that information with you, they don't want a team employee to know what time they went to bed, how poorly they've been sleeping. Probably doesn't provide a lot of value for me. But a conversation with a player, watching them walk in, watching them eat breakfast, I get a lot more about their sleep than I do from asking them a questionnaire that they may or may not be truthful on. I think that with all of the sports science and all the technology, that practitioners are kind of losing a bit of their feel in observation and in communications, that they're relying on the data that's provided to make decisions kind of in a silo, rather than weighing the actual person that is in front of you and what their goals are, motivations are, and any stakeholders that may have a role in that, of forming a complete picture.
That's awesome and super helpful. Well, this has been great, Shawn. Before we wrap up here, I'd love to do a rapid fire with you. Biggest mentor in your life?
There have been so many at different times. I'm going to say my biggest mentor is currently Dan Dyrick. He was a physical therapist. He had his own practice out of Boston. He was a consulting physical therapist for the Pacers for my first, I want to say, 13 years. He is one of the smartest people that in physical therapy and performance that I know. You won't find him on any social media.
That's awesome.
He's an under the radar.
Yeah. And then I have a basketball question here. What are the factors that you believe determine how good a on-the-ball defender is, in terms of what those are? Is it foot speed? Is it lateral strength? What do you think the different components are of that?
Discipline, being able to play with a low center of mass, being able to get around screens, having a strategy of how you do that. Whether I don't care if it's you like to dip your shoulder and step over, and then your lead leg goes over, or if you step over with your trail leg and get low, but just having a consistent strategy. And basketball IQ, understanding the player that's in front of you, their tendencies, understanding where their scoring spots are on the floor. Every player has spots on the floor that they want to get to. So how do they get to those spots? And if you're a really good defender, you understand what they're doing to get you to that spot. So there's a lot of basketball IQ with that. But yeah, you have to, like I said, play low. I think you have to be strong. I mean, we know that that people with best agility also have great lower body strength and power. So it's multifactorial.
Yeah, well, that's super helpful. Best book or research paper that you've read in the last year?
Oof. Best book or research paper? Boy, you're going to have to come back to me on that one. You stumped me with that.
Okay. And in terms of best, or what's the best way to frame this? Best or maybe underappreciated habit, big or small, that you have added or taken away to your daily routine in the last year?
Getting more sleep, for sure. Now that I'm not on the NBA travel schedule, and having a consistent bedtime and a little more consistent wake up time, just energy levels are so much better.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shawn, for coming on Super Athlete Radio. You have been absolutely amazing in terms of the wisdom that you provided here. Now that you are outside of the tunnel that is the NBA, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
I mean, if you just type in my name, Shawn Windle, Windle, you can find me on LinkedIn, X, Instagram. I'm slowly working on a web page, like just a what I'm up to type of thing, just a couple page where I'm at and what I'm doing. But yeah, usually just the socials, LinkedIn, not too hard to find usually. Probably not too interesting to follow either, but that's where you can find me.
That's awesome, Shawn. Well, I appreciate your time and expertise. I look forward to meeting you in person. Thank you so much for coming on Super Athlete Radio.
Yeah, thank you, Chase. Have a great day.